drop in and we are going to discuss that you do not manifest what you want, as well as we're going to be talking about fear of success, fear of failure, and the flaws and ceilings that we all have in our life. So my name's Marina. If we don't know each other, I am the founder of the School of Growth. I am a highly qualified in many modalities. I won't chew your ear off with them. Transformational coach. I really just help people facilitate positive change in their life and step into their potential and their purpose. And so today, what I want to dive into with you is that we do not manifest what we want. We manifest what our codes allow. We manifest what our system says is permissible. And this is really important because particularly of recent years, manifestation is, it's really a bit of a fad. It's a bit faddish, right? Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's talking about how to learn to manifest. And it kind of irks me a little because what I would love all of us to remember is we are impeccable manifestors. You are manifesting your life in its entirety right now based on your inner codes. Your reality is a reflection of your internal codes, period. Always has been, always will be. You are the creator or co-creator with the universe of your life. When we truly understand it, then we step into the power to actually be in conscious creation with those codes to call in and claim and create what we want. So you don't get what you want, you get what your codes allow, you get what your system says is permissible. Let me give you an example, because the other thing about this, it's not one layer. It's not like linear. It is multi-layered, it's a matrix, and is completely unique and individual. So let's take, for example, that you want to manifest abundance or a next level wealth, right? Because this is a common one. And let's say that you have a code, and by code I mean belief, right? But it helps, I have a degree in science and, physics and whatnot were kind of my go-to for a long time when I was heavily in my masculine in my youth. And I like codes because when I sit with clients, it really is A equals B. And then if you have B equals C, then really A equals C. Does that make sense? So let's look at this. Let's say you want to manifest money, more money. And we'll get to ceilings and floors in just a second, so sit tight. But I just want to talk about your codes. So you have a code perhaps in there that's like wealthy people or rich people are superficial and selfish. Some people have that code. So let's say you have that code. Now, what's important to note here, and this is just let this land. If you have no codes around what selfish and superficial means, even though you've heard people say, oh, rich people are superficial and selfish, and you see rich people in your life being superficial and selfish, I'm sure there are people who are not being like that, who are also wealthy, but let's say that's what your internal system is filtering for, deleting, distorting, and generalizing for. But if you don't have any other codes relating to selfishness and superficialness or richness, you can still be rich, no problems, right? Let's take next layer where let's say you have superficial and selfish equals bad. Now, and this is where it gets really interesting, right? That's also okay if you have a code that says, I'm a good person, then immediately money is now, or that level of wealth is now off the table because money equals bad and you equal good. Good and bad generally don't equal each other in most people's internal wiring. But let's say, stay with me here, let's say you have an internal code that says you're a bad person, because lots of people do. Maybe I'm not a good person, maybe I'm a bad person, maybe someone told me that in my youth. Maybe energetically I felt it in the people who raised me, that they thought they were bad, so maybe I must be intrinsically bad. So if I have a code that says rich people are selfish and superficial, and then I have a code that superficial and selfish equals bad because society judges it, but then I have a belief that I'm bad, well guess what? I'm free to be rich. So this is how codes work. And the reason I like codes better than beliefs is because yes, we can have limiting beliefs, but it's often that we have collapsed domains and cross collaborative codes that interact and influence one another. And it's really once you get clear on the map in its entirety that you'll understand very easily why something is or is not showing up the way you want it to, right? Because wanting is very different. That's a conscious desire. The unconscious is what's driving our reality because it holds all the codes that we loaded in. And generally we loaded these codes up until the age of 7. So they were created for many of us, unless you're a 9-year-old watching, a long time ago, right? So what do I want to move on to from here? I want to move on to the fact that all of your beliefs and all of your codes ultimately create a cage, if you will, of your conditioning. This is what I like to call it. So we all live in our current reality inside of a cage of conditioning. Most of us aren't even aware of it. And yet it's very easy to see it when you know how. And this is something I really like to help people become aware of, is what I call survival codes and the fundamental codes that are holding the framework of your life in place, especially if you're not getting what you want. So around this cage of conditioning, it doesn't matter if your life is amazing or your life at the moment is like just shit on shit on shit. We all have a cage of conditioning. We all have something that is inside of the matrix of all of our codes, allowed, survivable, and safe. And that's the realm within which we live. So now let's take this cage of conditioning and let's just map it into a floor and ceiling, right? So let's say this is my cage of conditioning, and then I've got my floor here, if you're watching, yeah. And then I've got my ceiling here. So I've got my floor kind of about bottom of my rib, and I've got my ceiling about my head. They're my two lines. Now, what generally happens in life is we just pendulate between the two, or we somehow hang out in the middle. But for the most part, unless we do growth work, inner work, personal development, transformational work, even though our system wants to, it can be really challenging unless you do those inner work around the codes to move beyond the floor and the ceiling, or to move into new layers of success. And we will also avoid failure, right? Because that's what the floor is. But these are all relative. So think about this in your own life. Think about it. Let's go again with the reference or the example of money. So around abundance, you have a ceiling. And perhaps this is the amount you haven't been able to earn more than. Now, we could certainly look at why that is. Maybe growing up, that's what you thought wealthy people did, or maybe that's the amount of money your parents earned, or maybe in your industry or career, that's the average, or for whatever reason, you have created a safe limit there. So it's your ceiling around money. But equally, you will have a floor around money. And if you really take note and look back, you have an amount you don't go below. For some people, that might be $500 in their account. And for other people, it would be, I don't go below 500,000 in my account. But you have a floor. You have a point at which your system sets off an alarm system and says, whoop, 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 unsafe, unsafe. We need to make more money. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're someone who, gets to change their income level themselves, this is really clear to see, because as you reach a certain level of either cash flow or money in the bank, it's like your system kicks in and you suddenly recreate, the next cash flow influx. Right? And the same will work. Honestly, the ways you can manifest the money will be quite remarkable, but your system will call in more because outside of that floor is unsurvivable. But equally, above the ceiling is unsurvivable. So inside the floor and ceiling, happy days, right? Even if it's suffering, it's still happy days because you're alive. So as an example, the statistics, I don't recall them off the top of my head, but the exact ones, but the amount of people who win the lotto, like win 120 million blah, blah, blahs, right? Dollars, usually Marina, not blah, blah, blahs. Whatever amount of money though, when they win it, within 5 years, I think it's something crazy like 97% or more of people who win the lotto are back to their regular wealth. They literally just purge that money off because they did not stretch their own ceiling to have it. They got propelled out of it, almost like a rocket ship, right? And so they just kind of flew back down into their safety zone. And this is the fear of success and the fear of failure. So we live inside floors and ceilings. Is this landing? Let me know. Just drop in and go, okay, yeah, I can see that. I generally haven't been below this much money. Maybe it's zero, so that's okay. Or maybe in debt. Maybe you have a floor that's debt level, X amount in debt, and your ceiling is low. Like, it's all relative, but you have a floor and a ceiling around money. You equally have a floor and ceiling around other things. Weight, for instance. Lots of people have a floor and a ceiling around weight. Their weight will pendulate between the highest level that they will, allow, and when they hit that, they're like, whoa, and they'll either consciously start making changes to their diet and nutrition, or they'll just unconsciously make some shifts and their weight will come back down. We all have a floor and ceiling around weight as well. We also have floors and ceilings around connection, flow, stress. It's super interesting. It's a tolerance thing, right? It's your zone of tolerance. It's your cage of acceptable, allowable reality. And so when we're inside the cage, we may not be happy, but our system is happy. Our system is happy because it knows what's happening. It's familiar. It's not unknown. It keeps us in belonging. It keeps us in, quote unquote, the routine, because the unconscious mind likes to lock in and load. because I think it's, again, a statistic about up to 95% of all of our decisions and our actions are automated. Why? Because we're actually, I like to call our system like a lazy genius. It's really smart, but it wants to conserve as much energy as possible. So it's going to just do the same thing again and again, even if that same thing is not super joyous, not super soul-led. It's like, cool, we're doing it again. Groundhog Day, essentially, on repeat. So when we want to, or when we consciously want to ascend that ceiling, our system gets a little freaked out. It's like, you know what? We don't know what's on the other side there. It's an unknown. And remember, I did a live a couple of days ago around what's really holding all your sabotage in place, the need to survive. And so when we're talking about an unknown, even though that doesn't sound terrifying to your system, it is, because it's like, what's the energy output going to be? Will we survive it? That sounds like a whole lot of effort for potential death. No, thank you. Because it's really smart, but it's also lazy, right? And the same is on the bottom, but let's focus on the top. So fear of success is more common than most people realize. And just to kind of really go into this a little more, lots of people think, I don't have a fear of success. I have a self-worth or a lack of belief issue. No, I work with so many high achieving individuals who totally freaking know. No, at the very core of their essence, they 100% can achieve what it is that they want. They know they can, which is why it's so frustrating for them, right? Because it's not that I don't believe I can. I know I can do it, so why am I not doing it? Well, you're not doing it because at the moment, your codes, and we're going to go back to these, you currently have A equals B, and then B somewhere along the line equals something that your system is not here for at the moment. And your job, your opportunity, you get to dive inwards, do the inner work, and figure that out. And update your codes to simply allow, because we don't manifest what we want, we manifest what our system allows. So have your system allow it, and then you get to have it, right? So let's say, for instance, and sometimes the reason we don't go into that level of success is because we fear we're going to lose something we value. It's actually very common. A lot of us have a code that if I get there, then I can't have this that I value now, right? And we're not willing to give it up because we are values-based individuals. So let me give a tangible example rather than speaking just in the ideology. So generally when I ask my clients, what do you want? And then they're like, whoa, I want this. And you ask them, okay, well, what would you lose if you had that? Or what would be the worst thing about that? They're like, oh, Marina, don't be ridiculous. It'd be amazing. There'd be nothing terrible about that. Nothing. I can't think of anything bad. You can't think of anything bad, but your unconscious system is like, no way, we're not showing up for that. Because it may have, for instance, when you really sit with it, well, what might I have to give up to have that thing I want? Let's say it's like an accelerated career. I've certainly worked through this one myself. So say, for instance, you want to be of greater service, or you want your career to go, meteoric, and you want to go next level with your impact, right? And then you sit down and you go, okay, well, what might I have to lose that I value? And you might just drill down and go, well, I know I wouldn't have to, but maybe I'd have to work a lot, because we have this belief in our collective, right, that we have to work really hard to be really successful, which is not true. And if you notice in your system, it's like, it is true, Marina. Well, there's a belief. There's one that might be blocking you. And what I want to propose to you and invite you to consider is there are a lot of people out there who do very little money, do not work very hard, and make a lot of money and have a lot of impact through leverage, through systems, through automation, etc. So coming back to the point, say you have the code, well, if I want that thing and I'm going to get that thing, but it's going to cost me, I'm going to have to work hard. That's fine. You might be like, I'm good at working hard. You might even have an identity that loves to work hard, that loves to be in suffering, that feels like a good, virtuous human for working hard. So hard work's allowed. But then you might realize, or might have a code that's like, well, working hard means no time with my family, or it might lead to my primary relationship falling apart. And then if you value that and you think it's going to cost you that, if that is a higher value in your system, then your overall system is going to go, no bueno, not happening, don't go there. And so these are essentially the blocks. You might want that impact with all of your heart. You might want that level of influence and that level of success. But if you have codes that don't allow it, and it's not like the code says don't be successful, it's not what it says. What it says is that successful means you can't have a loving family. Oh, I want a loving family. Or successful means you have to work really hard and it'll cost you your health. Oh, I want to be healthy. All of these things, and it's different for everyone, which is, I'm just throwing examples out. I hope you understand that, so that you can do some self-inquiry, or and I will suggest this, join me in the masterclass next Wednesday, and I'm going to show you the exact steps as to how to see your cage of conditioning, decode it, and then upgrade it. So definitely come to that, because we're going through the 5 steps to switch sabotage to success. Today is just to really talk about what fear of success is, what fear of failure is, flaws and ceilings, and why we don't get what we want. We get what our system has coded as allowable or survivable or safe, right? So sometimes we don't go above that ceiling because what we want outside there, yes, it's unknown, but it also might lead to lack of belonging. So if I was, say, this is you, me, we, I want to be super successful, but I don't know how to get there. And of course you do know how to get there. And of course you know you can get there. And of course you might really want to get there. But if on an unconscious level, you're coding, I'll be seen, people will judge me, I'll be rejected. We have a lot of things in our collective. Again, a lot of these beliefs and these energies and these stories and these rules are collective energies. History has shown us, and that those memories are in our ancestors. And if our ancestors went through, any of these experiences, then they're doubled down in our DNA, right? Because we do, I can tell you as a family constellations facilitator and family systems specialist, we 100% inherit codes through our family system. It's fascinating. Freaking love that side of the work I get to do. Okay, so we have the fear of success. And the fear of success is really just stepping outside the current realm of what's known. You would much rather handle the current stresses, the current shit show, than a new shit show. Because that new shit show, it's like the saying. We have sayings that really affirm these things. Better the devil you know, right? And yet sometimes it isn't better the devil you know, is it? Because the devil you know is not a good time. So the fear of failure is the same thing but in reverse. I will not allow myself to fall beneath this level because I am afraid I will no longer be in belonging with those people that I love and respect. And I don't know how to survive that experience. So I will not allow, my system will not allow me to fall into that experience. Now, the interesting thing here is even if you as a moving towards success, know you can do it. You know you can. You won't, because you are afraid that when you get there, it won't be survivable. You lose something you value, you lose belonging, and you won't be safe. So you won't start. This is where procrastination at its very essence, busyness, distraction, overwhelm all comes from. It stops us from moving powerfully forward as an act of protection. Likewise, we might not take an action because in our head, we may actually have a belief, I'm shit at this, I'm going to do a bad job. If I do a bad job, I'll be lowered in their estimation, I'll be rejected from the tribe, they'll laugh at me, etc., etc. So then we don't do the thing because we do believe that we'll fall below that floor that we have for ourselves, so we don't take the action either. And this is where we create the experience of stuckness. And even though we feel stuck and sticky and frustrated, we're also really safe there, right? So that's why we stay there. Okay, so floors and ceilings essentially create the external, if you will, top and bottom of the cage of your conditioning. And they are not a sabotage cycle. I often see people say that when you go up to the ceiling and you hit it and you bounce down, that's a sabotage cycle. That's not a sabotage cycle. That's you hitting a ceiling inside your cage of conditioning or what's allowed by your system. And then you'll bounce down and you may not go all the way to the bottom. You might just bounce around the middle. Maybe you'll go down to the bottom at some point, maybe not. I will break down in the masterclass the actual 7 stages of a sabotage cycle and exactly what triggers it and why it's happening. So definitely join me in the masterclass. But today, what I want to tell you is that your goal is not to get rid of a ceiling or get rid of a floor, but simply just imagine for a second, particularly around the example of, say, wealth, if you could elevate your floor and your ceiling, just elevate them and elevate them and elevate them over time, which you can, so that your floor is higher than it's ever been and your ceiling is higher than it's ever been. Yeah, we don't have to get rid of these constructs that keep the system in play. And this is, I think, one of the biggest messages I constantly try to get across is you don't have to change how your system works. In fact, fighting your system is the last and least successful route towards, manifesting your dream life and being your best self. It is far more efficient, in my experience, having worked with thousands of people over the years, to work with your system rather than against it. Don't fight your system. Really come into union with how it works and then work with it. Just like we do with nature when we're smart, work with nature and its natural cycles and flows to create what you want. Okay, there was something else I wanted to tell you. What was it? Give me a second. If you've got any questions, hit me up. If this is landing, give me some kind of feedback. Okay. So just to finish off and to wrap up with what we started on, we don't get what we want, we get what our system allows. I'm going to keep saying that because it's really important. Because a lot of people say, figure out what you want. And you do need to figure out what you want, because confusion or being unclear is a form of self-sabotage. It's a protective mechanism, because if I don't know what I want, well, then I definitely can't start moving towards it, can I? So it's a really clever way to stay safe. But one of the things that I've come to learn to be true, and again, take what works for you and leave the rest, is that the bigger want wins, right? So I might consciously really want to, move to a certain country or have a relationship or be a certain level of health or a certain level of wealth or whatever it is. I might really want it. So you think the want is big. But when I talk about the bigger want wins, I'm talking about the consistent, wired and fired want wins. Right? So you might want that with all of your heart and your soul's desire. And it is valuable to have that loaded, mind you. And we can definitely use that to quantum up the wiring and firing of it. There are techniques for that. But it's important to remember that these other potentially restrictive codes or codes in your system that say that's not allowed, or we want to be this way, and if we do that, that would be in interference with this value, etc., as I pointed out at the top of the chat. And so those wants might have been in place for 10 years, 20 years. They may have like encyclopedias full of evidence as to why they're valuable and why they should stay in play. And so they have been wired and fired, and the neural pathways are really deep and really like rapid fire. And so when it comes to the want, you might have a really strong desire or wanting of a thing, but you have a really big, I suppose, wired and fired and proven want of the system to stay in sameness. And this is the real challenge about creating big shifts, right? And there are multiple strategies, and I'll be breaking them down in the masterclass, where we can start to kind of seesaw this in the opposite direction. We can do it slowly and progressively and over time, or we can do it much faster. And it really depends on what's present and what outcome you want to achieve. So I hope this was valuable. I hope that you learned something about your fear of success. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you found it interesting. And also your fear of failure. And the invitation is for you to go and look at your life now, to really look at, okay, yeah, where are my ceilings and my floors? And then when you notice that you have a ceiling, get curious as to what is it that you fear. Fear, and remember, fear is not something that you might consciously be afraid of, but what is your system potentially resistant to that sits on the other side of that ceiling? Because that's the only reason that you can't yet in this moment have it. Because if your system is wide open and ready to roll and it has got no inhibitions around you having it, you'll have it. And we see this in our life. Just to finish this off, there are areas in your life where change is super easy. And I want to point this out to reaffirm for you that change is easy if the codes are aligned and coherent. When the codes are aligned and coherent, change is like this. When the codes are like, it gets a little trickier. It's still not impossible, but the work is not external, it's internal. So just an invitation to remember that. I hope this helped. If you have any questions, hit me up in comments. Otherwise, have a beautiful night and stay amazing. And remember that you truly are magical and that you can manifest anything you want because you already are manifesting what currently is allowed. The key is to update your codes to support what you want. Big loves.